My name is Slavica Bozic. I'm a product manager for electrical products here at Bentley, and it's my great pleasure to present Bentley Raceway and cable management to you today. So Bentley Raceway and cable management is the first and only application on the market that combines cable management, raceway design, and equipment placement into a single application. And this unique integration enables shorter project execution and improved quality of design, which also results in reduction in construction change orders and in overall project reduction cost. So I want to start by presenting a typical workflow in Bentley Raceway and cable management. There's a lot of variations in the workflow, but this is a workflow that we would recommend to a user that is just starting to use our product. So the design starts by importing cable lists into Bentley Raceway cable management, placing electrical equipment or importing that from iModel, doing a preliminary raceway design, followed by a detailed raceway design, and finishing with automatic or manual cable routing and doing various reports, construction drawings, and schedules. But before we start working on a Bentley Raceway cable management project, there are a couple of things that we have to do first to ensure the successful project execution. So some of those steps are first to ensure that all content that we need for the project is available, meaning all specific raceway equipment catalogs are available to us. You would most likely have to customize Bentley Raceway cable management to meet your exact corporate standards, CAD standards. You will have to define the format of cable and equipment list that you plan to use. And you need to decide on the project structure, which means how many raceway and equipment files you want to have, how many users will be participating in the project, and so on. And finally, setting up the project database for your new project. So Bentley Raceway and cable management is utilizing SQL database. So by default, we ship Bentley Raceway and cable management with SQL Express database. And there's several variations how you can set it up. So the single database can host all your projects. We have users that use a single database for entire organization, or users that would have separate database for each site. So it's all up to you. What you need to do is you have to make sure that all project participants are connected to the centralized database, and we can accomplish that by using ODBC connection. Users don't create any specific tables in the database. Once you start BRCM and create your project, all tables will be automatically created in the database. And each project has its own set of database tables. So when you're defining your project, there are a couple of variables that will define your connection to the database. For example, this BRCM database ID variable is setting your unique project ID, and all tables in the SQL database that belong to that project will start with that BRCM database ID prefix, as you can see here. So it's a very simple and effective way to get your projects going. The next step is deciding a number of DGN files. So this depends on how many users you plan to have on the project. So if you have a large project and you plan to have 10 users that are going to work on raceway design, the most logical thing is to have 10 or more DGN files for the raceway so each user can work in its own file. Of course, we can't have a single user. We can't have single file being accessed by multiple users at the same time. That's the microstation rule. And a couple important things that I want to highlight. So raceway and equipment files, they contain all information in the file itself, which means if you move raceway or equipment file between different projects, as long as they have the same data set, then you can update the database from raceway and equipment files. So these files essentially both write information in database, but can also be updated from database as well. It's a little different with routing files and extraction files. So those files are primarily reading information from the database, so you can move them between different projects. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning that creating a content is very important, so I want to show you how easy it is to create content in Bentley Raceway Cable Management. As you can see, we have a user interface that helps us to do that. In this example, I would like to create a new Cooper Beeline catalog, Ready Rail catalog. We don't have this one. And notice that there are some specific attributes. For example, the material is aluminum, and they have a specific sizes that are different from other catalogs. So I'm going to incorporate that into Bentley Raceway Cable Management. So first I will select the existing Cooper Beeline catalog, since again the catalogs are very similar. And you can also just use a general template, it doesn't have to be a specific manufacturer. And in the first step, I'm going to remove all 6-inch high fittings, since this catalog has only up to 5 inches. So I can remove this from this template catalog. And also I need to remove all straight sections other than 10 and 12-foot sections, since they don't exist in this catalog. And finally, I have to make some changes in the attributes. So this catalog has only one material option. It's aluminum. So I'm going to override the existing one. And finally, the series number. Again, this catalog has only one series, and I'm going to type in the values for this series. So that's pretty much all that you have to do to create your new catalog. You adjusted the sizes. Or you can also add new sizes. It's not only about removing sizes, you can add the brand new sizes. In this example, it turns out that all we needed to do is remove. So now your newly created catalog is available in the Raceway router. So you can select the desired size, follow up with user-definable attributes such as series and material, so making sure that we're using the correct preferences. And you can proceed with placing this Raceway. So notice it took us only a few minutes to create a new catalog. So we didn't have to modify any XML files or anything. Everything was done for you through a user interface. So now let's take a look at the bill of materials for this specific example, a very small example, so the bill of materials will be small as well. And I'm going to export this into Excel file. And so I want to show you that the description of the catalog of the components is shown as the Red Rail catalog with the specific product codes, the specific materials, and so on. So it definitely reflects the new catalog that we just created. And of course, you can customize this report to look different if you need to. The next step, I want to show you how easy it is to set up the corporate standards. So most likely your cable types would be different from cable types that we provided with Bentley Raceway Cable Management. So I want to show you how to add those new cable types. In this example, I have only a few new cable types, and most important attributes that you have to define are diameter, weight, of course the name of the new cable type, and the units that you will be using. And through XML mapping file, we're essentially telling BRCM where to look in the Excel file for a specific information. And now you can see that by importing this Excel spreadsheet, first our differencing dialog tells us that everything we're importing is brand new. We don't have that in our catalog, so we're going to confirm that we want to import this. And now at the bottom you can see the new cable types are added to my cable library. And if you need to add only a few cable types, so you can simply just go in and do that directly in UI. You don't have to work with Excel files. You can simply type in the cable name, define the units, diameter, and weight, and your new cable type is defined and ready to be used. And also you can customize this with any additional attributes that you may require in your design. So in next step, I will show you how to work with new levels. Of course, every company has a different CAD standards when it comes to level definition. So it's important that you can customize the application very quickly to use your own levels. So the very first thing you can do is, of course, you can import all levels from OpenDGM files. So you can open your seed file and import all levels from that seed file. That would be the easiest thing to do if you have a lot of levels to work with. Or you can manually add a level one at a time if you have to add only a few levels. And then these levels will become available for us to use. The next step is defining the cable laying method. So you can set different cable laying methods using different override criteria. So in this example, I'm setting that by defining overrides based on voltage level. So in this example, I'm defining that all my, for example, specific conduit type should be always using a single cable in the conduit type, or for all cables that have mid voltage or MV voltage level, they should be routed using a single layer. So these are just out of the box cable laying method that will be assigned if you simply just do outer routing without any additional settings. But of course, you can override those settings on the fly. And also you can set the weight limitation. So it's not only about the fill, it's also about cable weight. So you can set the weight limitations. You can also add a new voltage level. So we're dealing with default voltage levels at LV, MV, control IW, but you can be more specific and add the specific voltage levels. In this example, I'm just adding 480 and 600 volts. And at the end, we can also set automatically which microstation levels to be assigned to different raceway systems. So for example, if we're placing cable tray ladder and if we're defining low voltage level, I would like to specific microstation layer to be automatically assigned, so I don't have to make changes as I'm placing raceway. So I want this to be intelligent, and you can definitely do that by defining all these overrides. And finally, you can define the status of the cables in which you don't want any further modifications. So which means if I set my cable status to, in this example, only for status design, new and active, cable modifications are allowed. Or if I set my cable to built or released, that means that no further changes will be permitted to that specific cable. So those are some settings that, some fundamental setup steps that you have to do before you start your project. So in summary, we do deliver a lot of catalogs, but it always turns out that you need to add some new catalogs. So it's very simple and easy to do through user interface. You can easily incorporate all your standards into BRCM, and definitely you can configure BRCM to work with ProjectWise to manage the entire workspace and all DGM files. Not required, but recommended. And from our experience, most users are set to work on their first project only about 1 week of training and setup. So we have somebody on site to help you for about a week to train you how to use the product, help you to set up your first project, and from that point you're ready to go. So in the summary, the main benefit of using Bentley Raceway and cable management efficient setup is you will be able to accomplish high quality at the reduced time and the reduced cost. Now let's take a look at how to actually do the work within Bentley Raceway and cable management. So there is no a set workflow that users have to use. We understand that each project is different, so you don't have to start by importing cable lists first. For example, you can start by simply placing equipment first, or some users I have seen that they start placing Raceway even though when equipment is not available yet, but they kind of know where the equipment will be available, so they have some placeholders. So anything, whatever works for you, there is no requirement that you have to start with equipment placement or have to start with cable list imports and then do the Raceway design. You can do as it fits your project profile. So I want to start by showing you how to import cable lists. So cable lists can come from all different sources. This specific example came from Promisee, and the second example came from our other product, instrumentation and wiring. So noticing that the formats of cable lists are very different. So that's why we have the XML mapping file that essentially tells us how to interpret information from Excel file. So this example, routing filter or voltage level is in column Z. So just to confirm, in your Excel spreadsheet, it shows you the column Z with the voltage level, or if we take a look at the cable type, it shows us the cable type is in a column G. So the thing that are mandatory for your cable list, of course, you have to have a cable type, you have to have a unique cable ID. Each cable has a unique ID in the project, and you have to have a source and target, and everything else is optional. So you can have as many information as you need, or as little as it's required. This review differences dialog box, you're going to utilize that a lot in Bentley Raceway and cable management. So essentially it tells us that all cables that we're importing right now are brand new cables that don't exist in this project database. So in this second step, I'm following exactly the same process, just importing different cable lists that came in from instrumentation and wiring, the same process. And there is no limitation how often you need to import your cable list. So sometimes all it takes is doing cable list import once, you know that your cable lists are finalized. But in a lot of cases, we have seen that cable lists are not finalized until the very end. Even cable management may still be going on and cable lists are not finalized, so you can import as often as you need. So now I made a small changes in the cable list that I have already imported, so I want to show you what happens. So first, I'm using the cable type that doesn't exist in our library. So Bentley Raceway and Cable Management lets me define that cable type on the fly. If it's not already defined, I can define that now when I'm importing a cable list. And notice that the first cable, when I select the first cable, so it tells me that the cable type has been modified. It shows me the new value and the old value, and the status is modified. So the other cable, it shows me to be a completely new cable, has a status added. The same thing with the second cable. So it's a good change tracking tool that will help you to make sure that you incorporate these changes. So now when I open the cable management, it actually identifies the cable as changed. Since cable already exists in cable management manager, we want to make sure that we tell user that something has changed with this cable since it has been originally imported into the project. The next thing is placing electrical equipment. So you can place electrical equipment from a specific catalog, so you can create a different catalogs for the equipment and place them that way. Notice this one has different options for each panels for each manufacturer. Or you can place a generic equipment. So if you're not sure exactly what type of the panel could be used, but you know approximate dimensions, you can simply type those dimensions or place multiple cabinets or multiple equipment at single points. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. And of course, you can play with different attributes. In this example, I want to open doors to make a clearance detection easier. And simply go in and place the equipment. You type in the equipment ID and place your equipment. So the example that I just showed you deals with a parametric equipment, but most of the equipment that we have seen users are currently using are the equipment from cells. So definitely we can incorporate your existing cells and make them the BRCM equipment. In this example, that's what we're using with a motor, so there is really no different settings. You're just placing a cell. And in this example, I don't know exactly what tag this motor is going to have, so I'm just placing a generic M tag. And when I'm importing the equipment in my ID manager, notice that this is already the panel here. On the right side is not mapped, but when I'm importing the equipment map, Bentley Raceway and Cable Management will understand that this equipment here should be mapped with specific cable IDs, and that mapping is done automatically. But for my motor that I placed, the mapping is not done automatically because I only have a generic tag M, not M5. So I have to do manual association. So I can go and tell, well, this motor is actually motor M5 that came in from my cable lists, and this association takes place. So notice that it has a couple additional tags, so it just means that there's multiple cables. So I just want to explain to you how this whole process works. So essentially, we're importing terminal connection IDs from the cable lists, This is what comes through your different cable list import. And then the equipment IDs are additional piece of information that puts together different terminal connections. So for example, for motor 5, you see the equipment tag is N5. This is our green tag. And we have different terminal connection IDs that came in through cable lists. So that's how we tie it all together. So the equipment ID ties together all different information, all different terminal connection IDs from the cable lists. Okay, so in the next step, I just want to briefly review the benefits of importing cable list and equipment. So essentially, you don't have to format your cable list in a specific format. So whatever format you currently have, you can customize Bentley Raceway cable management to work with that. If they come in from different applications or if they're manually created, that's perfectly fine. This can be brought into cable management effectively. And you can import this cable list as many times as you need, and change management tool will help you to track the changes and recognize them. The next step, I just want to reflect briefly on importing iModels. In this small example, I'm importing iModel from OpenPlant. We do support iModel import from Bentley Substation as well. So all you need to do is simply reference the iModel into your file and select the area that you want to import. Sometimes iModel can be overwhelming and you're interested only in small areas, so that's why you make a selection set. You select either OpenPlant or Substation schema, and at that point, Bentley Raceway Cable Management talks to iModel, and it's recognizing the equipment in the iModel as a connection point in Bentley Raceway and Cable Management. And we don't place a brand new equipment in Bentley Raceway and Cable Management. We just place a connection point or a junction box to equipment that is already in OpenPlant iModel. So if we take a closer look here, we have placed the connection points on the existing motors and pumps in OpenPlant model. And it also comes in with the equipment IDs, of course, from the OpenPlant modeler. So the benefits is obvious, so you don't have to place the equipment again. Since equipment exists in OpenPlant modeler, you can simply bring that information in and build your raceway model based on this information. It allows us to collaborate across different disciplines, and the same thing with OpenPlant or Substation iModel import. It still goes through the referencing, through the differencing dialog box, so you will be able to see if they change anything, if equipment is moved or added or replaced with the new equipment. So all these changes will be effectively tracked through Bentley Raceway and Cable Management. And as a result, of course, your projects will be completed faster because you are reusing information and the data integrity is improved. So now, finally, let's take a look at the raceway design. And one of the key benefits of Bentley Raceway and Cable Management is you can place multiple raceway sections at once. So at the top I have cable ladder. Those are different catalogs available. You want this raceway to be smart since you will be using that for cable management. So you're going to define the voltage level, the desired cable laying method. It comes up with the defaults, of course, but you always can overwrite that. And the same for the cable tray on the bottom. This is the cable tray solid bottom. It can be a completely different size than the top. You can have, I think the most that I have seen, I've seen some users having 12 raceway sections. Actually, I believe there was a mix of conduits and raceway being placed at once. So when it comes to placement, it's very simple because it works with AccuDraw. So notice when I'm making the right turn with AccuDraw, it automatically places the 90 degrees bend for me. And in preferences, previously we defined what bend radius we want for these 90 degrees bends. And if you connect to existing piece of the raceway, so I'm connecting only to the top section, it automatically picks up all raceway attributes, so you don't have to worry about that. And right now, I'm rotating AccuDraw to place a vertical bend, and again, rotating it again to place an additional straight section. And you can see that it's very simple and easy to navigate through your model and place Raceway through. So again, a lot depends on working with AccuDraw, so definitely you have to be familiar with MicroStation, with simply navigating and working with in MicroStation 3D environment and the AccuDraw. Notice that I wasn't really careful when I placed this Raceway, so guess what? There's a lot of problems with how I did this. So there's a lot of crashes. I ran this Raceway right through the piping, so definitely not the well-done design. So, well, you know, there's simple ways how I can fix this. So you don't have to go and place the Raceway again. So all I need to do is just select the Raceway section, use modification tools. And in this example, I know that I have to move the Raceway for about 9 inches or so to the other side, so I can do that. And you notice that all the connections between Raceways are automatically maintained. Even if I had the cables routed through, that's not a problem at all. Cable lengths would be automatically adjusted. So now when I run the clash detection again, I see that all my interferences are resolved. So it's not only about giving you the tools to effectively place the Raceway, it's also giving you tools to detect any interferences and correct them as you're going along. So a few more examples on the designing and modifying the Raceway. So right now, I just want to place some Raceway between a few pieces of equipment, and again, relying on AccuDraw to start the Raceway placement about 1 foot from the panel and going on. Now I have some equipment laid out on another side that I need to supply, and I'm going to run the Raceway kind of just eyeballing and running through. So notice that it automatically creates the crossover for me, so it understands the way how Raceways are crossing each other, that a crossover will be required. So obviously I haven't really placed this very precisely, and I need to adjust this slightly and move the Raceway to one side. And I noticed that these bands came in with 24-inch band radius. I actually want to use 12, so I can go in and change that as I'm going. And if you need to insert additional Raceway fittings after the initial run is placed, you can do that simply by selecting the type of the fitting, the attributes of the fitting. I can flip this on the go and place a T. What it does, it automatically cuts the existing straight section and inputs and inserts the T section. So I can also place Raceway fittings by selecting the specific fitting. So if you're not the best friends with AccuDraw, then you can use this as well. You can use the place part option, where you can simply select a 90 degrees vertical band or any other fitting instead of using AccuDraw. So both are possible, but as you go along and as you learn how to use Bentley Raceway Cable Management, most users simply rely on AccuDraw because it's faster. And of course, you can move that fitting along. So if it turns out that you didn't place fitting in the right location, then you can just move it along, and it automatically heals the gap that you created and places the fitting in the right location. So now, in this example, I'm just placing a few conduits, and again, using the AccuDraw to align myself properly to be at the same elevation as the cable tray. And with conduits, especially if you're going to use some specific body styles, then it's recommended to use the insert option instead of AccuDraw. So I'm using the specific conduit body style with this arrangement and placing it. So of course you can copy if the Raceway design is repetitive in nature, you can just copy across, and it's as simple as that. At this point, the conduits are not connected to the cable tray yet, so I can simply select the cable tray, select all conduits, and connect them with the Raceway. That ensures that cables will be successfully routing from the Raceway to the conduits. Just notice this routing line, it's automatically placed, so you don't have to place that manually. That's one of the new tools in Connect Edition. And We can also confirm that connection exists between the panel and the equipment on the other side by selecting the closest raceway to each equipment, and it shows me the path, the shortest path to the raceway. Okay, the next thing that I want to show you is how to convert lines to raceway. So in a lot of examples, you might already have some raceway layout done in MicroStation or in AutoCAD or in other applications where you can isolate the central lines. So you can easily convert these lines into raceway in Bentley Raceway Cable Management and into intelligent raceway. So you would define the properties for the raceway, define the preferences for conversion, and it will simply convert these lines into raceway. So notice that it actually is recognizing, where the specific fittings need to be placed. And if it turns out that you have to change the size, that's no problem. You can simply select and change from one size to another. I'm changing to much larger size, so it's obvious that the size change is taking place. So again, even if you had the cables routed through this raceway, if you change the size of the raceway, it will automatically adjust the fill factor for that raceway. So next step, we just want to see how to assign the raceway IDs, and of course I can turn off the rungs on the cable tray ladder. It's definitely creating a distraction for me if I want to place the raceway IDs. So I can place the raceway IDs by utilizing the routing option between 2 points, or I can select the raceway by manually selecting each raceway section. So if I manually select raceway sections, they will be added to selection set. And then I can play with the macro. So in this example, my macro consists with the tray type CL for cable ladder dash voltage level and dash the unique serial number. And I can adjust my start values or increments, so change increments from 2 to 1, and apply different raceway ID macros. So each raceway ID is an entity for itself, so you can delete them, move them around, and position them effectively the way how they best suit your needs. Duct bank design is also a very important part of Bentley Raceway and Cable Management, and this is a very small example that shows you how to place the duct banks. So of course you're starting by defining, first of all, how big the duct bank is going to be. So I'm going to have 4 rows and 3 columns, and then it will show me the preview of the spacers. In this example, I already selected the spacers, so there's a difference between bottom spacers, of course, and the top spacers. So we distinguish between that. And that will also be used when we generate the concrete. We know what a bottom margin is. So if I select the conduit size that doesn't fit the spacers, it's larger than the spacers, the system is aware of that. It will not allow me to select conduits that can fit into the spacers. So I have to go and select something that actually makes the most sense. And of course, I'm going to select the NEC rules for filling these conduits. But you can also define some additional rules if you're from the regions where NEC rules are not used. You can define different rules for conduit fill. In this example, I want to show you how branching of the duct bank works. So first you select the fitting, the orientation of the branching, and I chose to branch the entire row. The next example, I want to show you that you can branch individual conduits only. So you can select only 2 conduits and branch them with a specific fitting. And finally, I have 1 more conduit left, but I want to make sure that that one is branched as well. And then simply by utilizing the AccuDraw or placing the specific fitting, whichever you prefer, I'm going to finish this duct bank placement. And of course, you need to continue running these conduits from the branch, and I can select multiple conduits if they have the same layout, and I can run them at the same time. Notice that I'm placing a lot of just simple 90 degrees bends, but it doesn't have to be. It's actually rarely that simple, of course. So when you're placing the conduits, you can run any angle. So the conduits can definitely be bent. So notice that I'm just running random angles, so you can place conduits pretty much at any angle, or you can utilize the parts that are available with the catalog. So once we define the main conduit run for a duct bank, the next step is to define the concrete envelope. So I'm just going to select the start. Then it automatically selects the entire duct bank for me. And of course, you just define the margins for the concrete, and it automatically generates or concrete or wraps the entire duct bank in the concrete. So we don't want to forget the manholes, of course, so I can place the manholes after duct bank is defined, or I can put the manholes first, and then of course run duct banks through them. And the manhole will automatically cut the existing duct bank, and it also provides the automatic connection through the manhole. So you can also modify the duct bank, so duct bank and manhole. In this example, I will stretch the duct bank to the right slightly, and it automatically is modifying both concrete and conduits. And the same thing, if I need to modify the size of the manhole, I can do that as well on the fly. Also, we provide the tools for designing a cable trench. So this is another method for carrying cables from one location to another. Inside the cable trench, we're using the supports, not the cable tray, but essentially just the supports for putting cables on. And you can define each support separately. So each one is its own entity. They can all be the same, but they can be different. And of course, you have options to set left side only, right side only, both sides. You can define, they're the same or different, and so on. You can play with the size of the concrete around it. So I'm just adding one more support section here. And of course, you can also define the attributes for each section. It's important that we know how to lay out cables. And this trench can be with cover or without cover, so those options can be defined as it's being placed. And there are certain fittings available for cable trenches as well, not as many fittings, just simple bends, tees, and crossovers. So you notice that now inside cable trench, we automatically generate all the supports, and the cable connections through cable trench are automatically established. The same as with duct banks and raceways, you can modify the trench as well. You can just increase or decrease the length of the cable trench, or you can insert the part into the existing trench section. So now I'm just inserting a crossover here. For the simplicity, it automatically will cut the existing concrete, generate the fitting, and insert automatic connection through the cable trench. Okay, so just in summary, the benefits of doing raceway design, duct bank design, and the cable trench design with Bentley Raceway cable management is it's definitely the most efficient way of routing and modifying raceway duct banks and cable trenches. So that we're also the only application that actually provides unified duct bank, trench, 3D design, and cable routing. And the most important thing is actually whatever changes you're making in the raceway design, duct bank, or cable trench design, those changes will be automatically propagated to your routing model. So if you change the raceway size or duct bank size or whatever, it automatically will change the fill factors for you. And based on the experience that we have from the existing Bentley Raceway cable management users, they're reporting to us that they have up to 30% of reduction in design time compared to any competing applications that are currently on the market. So now let's get to the interesting part, the automatic cable routing. So the cable routing file sets as an empty file. As I said at the beginning, it pulls the information from the database. So right now I'm defining which files I want to work on. So this is the point where you define if you're going to be doing cable routing for the entire project. You're going to check out all files, all design files, or maybe you will do cable routing for a specific part of the project only. So you can define that depending on which files you check out. So once you check out the file for cable routing, that file will be unavailable to somebody else to do cable routing. They can still do raceway design and equipment placement and so on, but if you check out files for the cable routing, they're checked out to you only because you are currently modifying that information. And of course, you can limit that even further. For example, if you want to simply route cables between few pieces of equipment, you can check out that equipment only, not the entire file, but that equipment only, and then you will be locking only a small portion of the project. So first we're going to pre-check if all equipment has the outer routing entry point. So essentially how Bentley Raceway and cable management works, it defines the area in which the outer router will look for available raceway. So in this example, the routing sphere is too small, it doesn't catch the cable tray on the top, so I'm going to manually select that. In this example, the panel has the top insertion point and obviously doesn't reach the raceway on the bottom, so I'm going to increase the bounding sphere radius, so now it's catching the raceway on the bottom. So the outer router will then look through all these routing spheres or through specific raceway selections, and we'll do further filtering. Of course, we'll make sure that the cable tray is the proper voltage level for the cable. We'll make sure that the cable tray or conduit is not already filled. And if those criteria are met, then the outer router will check and run multiple analysis and determine the shortest path through the raceway that meets the criteria. Okay, so we can also take a look at different cable attributes. So again, those are just some examples. You can configure this. So we have users that have far more attributes than these cables that I'm showing you right now. And we're finally ready for the outer routing process. So in the outer routing process, everything is pre-set up for you, and you can run the outer routing. It's very efficient. We've done a lot of optimizations in the algorithm. So if a cable fails the routing, it tells you why it failed the routing process. So it tells me that two cables have failed because there is no raceway that was found for those. Notice that once I complete a cable routing, it automatically generates the outer routing model in the background. So again, this is just a scratch model. It can be deleted and regenerated, and it shows me the current fill factor for selected piece of the raceway. So it's also color coding, so you can set to orange, for example, if it's approaching close to maximum fill factor. And right now I'm reviewing the routes, and it shows me all raceway IDs for this particular cable route. So this will be part of the various cable schedule reports later. And I can also filter, and if you have a large project, filtering is really essential for you. So I'm just filtering those cables that have failed the routing. I'm going to take a look what's going on with those cables. So what's happening with these cables, so they don't really have the conduits between the equipment and the cable tray, so cable just expected to just jump directly. And I'm going to route these cables using manual process. So the manual process consists of either selecting the raceway, meaning selecting the closest piece of raceway to source and closest piece of raceway to the target. And BRCM will automatically pick up the shortest possible route between these two pieces of raceways. Or you can be very specific and you can select each piece individually if you wish so. So now these cables are routed as well. And you can always distinguish between cables that are manually routed and cables that are outer routed. So notice that cables that are just manually routed, they don't have the outer route designation. So it's an indication for us that we have routed these cables manually. Also, sometimes, if you don't like the route that cable is taking, you can manually reroute, and the outer router will not overwrite. So anything that you manually route will not be overwritten. So right now, I have a fill of 15% on this conduit. So if I go back to Cable Manager and change the cable type, so for example, maybe we just imported cable list and they did the cable sizing, and it turns out that it needs to be a larger cable. All I need to do is go back to refresh my routing model, go back to the routing model, and review the fill factor again, and notice that fill factor is now changed from 15 to 36 since we have a larger cable. And the same thing would happen if we change the conduit size, maybe from to different size. It will also change the fill factor for us. Okay, let's take a look one more time at the change management. So again, I made a few changes in the initial cable list, and I'm importing that cable list, the process that I've shown you before. Again, I'm just going to show you in change management again is recognizing when cable has been deleted. That's very important. And is recognizing when cables have been added or modified and so on. So we worked with a lot of users that expressed concerns about deleting cables. So that's why we changed the way how Bentley Raceway and cable management works. The fact that somebody deleted a cable doesn't mean it will be automatically removed from Cable Manager. Essentially, we mark that as a cable that's pending deletion. So whoever is doing cable management, they have to be in agreement that this cable should really be deleted. So you can either acknowledge this change, and from this point on, the cable has changed the color back to black normal, or you can reject and follow up with a team member who deleted the cable. Because sometimes cable can be accidentally deleted and it can cause a huge problems. And of course, I can change the status of the cable and say these cables are now released for construction and they're untouchable for everybody else. And you can also create a report at the end that shows you who has changed the status of the cable, when the status has been changed, and so on. So you have a good tools to track the change management, actually to document change management. Okay, one more enhancement that we added in BRCM Connect Edition is to create a 3D cables or to visualize the 3D cables. So we're not manually placing 3D cables. We don't have that tool yet, but once the cable management is done, we can visualize these cables. So if I turn the reference file with my cable tray, with my Raceway design, and just change the display slightly, you will see that these cables are running through the Raceway. So they take the bend radius off the cable tray, of course. So the cables are visualized both through the cable tray's conduits, and if they have a separate runs outside the Raceway system, they're visualized as well. So just to summarize the benefits of automatic cable routing. So the auto routing is using a very comprehensive algorithm, which is of course user definable. You can tweak that. It's using voltage levels, cable routing methods, available Raceway capacity to find the optimal route. And if you compare this to traditional manual cable routing, as most users are doing it today, this only takes a fraction of time. And the most important thing is that the changes are automatically propagated from Raceway model to the routing model. The feedback that we've gotten from users is that the first project could be painful because you have to set up all these standards. Once you set up the standards in your first project, they're good for all your subsequent projects. So they told us that users told us that once they're on their second or third project, they can definitely see the time-saving component and improvements in the quality of their cable management. And well, we all still have to produce the drawings, regardless of the fancy 3D modeling. The deliverables are still 2D drawings. So we have a separate tool for creation of the construction drawings. So notice that there's a resymbolization taking place here, automatic resymbolization. The drawings are automatically removed. So it creates much cleaner drawings than if you were just doing dynamic views. You can still use dynamic views or just saving views and so on, but this should be in addition to that. The other benefit is, so I'm interested in different attributes in this particular section of the Raceway. So I'm placing a section plane and I'm interrogating or reporting on different attributes in this specific point. So this automatically creates the report that shows me the Raceway IDs, for example, the fill factor, the cables that are running through, the quantity, the weight, and everything. And there's a lot of different reports that you can choose from. And utilize them as you need to. Some are more complex than others. Some are fairly simplistic. For example, this one is commonly used just to communicate the information about cables through each piece of raceway. So it shows us the quantity, cable type, and size. The next one, for example, is the visualization. It actually shows me visually how many cables are routed through the raceway system. And so this is the one-to-one scale. So you would probably have to scale that to be larger to show that properly. And we can also add the raceway labels. So I predefined a couple raceway macros. So of course you can combine all different raceway attributes into a label. This one just shows me the elevation and the width of the raceway. So I've saved a couple macros. So you can save the most commonly used macros. Or if you have some very unique labeling needs, so you can just come up with the label macro on the fly by selecting different attributes. So those are all attributes that are available for us, so I can select them. So for example, I'm interested in a series number, so I'm interested, the next thing I'm looking for the width of the raceway, so I can go on and insert additional attributes and just go ahead and place them on the fly. When it comes to duct bank extractions, we also do a lot of resymbolization. So notice that this duct bank is very complex, so there's a lot of conduits inside and concrete. So all we do is we show the concrete boundary and the central line through the concrete boundary. So of course you can set this up to have different levels and line styles and so on. And similar to Raceway, we have some specific tools for reporting of the context of the duct bank. In this example, I don't have any cables routed through, so it just shows 0, but this is a very useful report. It shows you the conduit ID, the voltage level, the fill factor, the type, and everything. At the end, you probably would end your project by creating a different schedules and reports. So there are a couple different ways. So some reports can be created from cable management, such as cable drum reports, and it exports to directly to Excel file or PDF file. So this is just a general cable drum report, or we can do a cable pull card. This is something that's heavily used for construction. So it creates one master Excel spreadsheet with pull cards for each cable in your project. The other reports are available, the general reports are available from our output manager. And again, those can be customized to fit your specific needs. Just the general reports, and I'm selecting only a specific DGN file, so you can report per set of DGN files or for entire project, depending on which resources you set to report on. So this is just a general view of quantity. And of course, you can either just a preview report, or you can export to Excel, PDF, CSV file, and so on. So if you export a file, of course, you can then copy and paste that file directly in DGN file, and you can establish link between the two. So every time you update the report, it will automatically update your DGN file, your report on DGN file as well. So right now we're reviewing various cable schedules, and this is really very. We have a lot of reports based on different requirements from different customers. It can be a very simple report. It just shows you, as one that I showed you before, cable source and target type and so on. Of course, the detailed BOQ per cable type, or we can produce a very complex cable reports that actually will show you different. Will show you the entire route with all the Raceway IDs that route that are in your cable route. Show you the conduit type if there is a conduit type associated with, and again, a couple of variations of this one. This can be with all Raceway IDs in the single line, or for each. This particular report is actually showing you The cable routing status shows you which cables are routed, when are they routed. You can also add user names to this report to see who routed the cables and when the cables were routed. And those are the most detailed cable schedules that are used to show you for each section of the raceway which cables are running through each section, which cable IDs, and so on. And these reports are mostly used by the construction team rather than the design team. May look a little more abstract if you're not involved in the construction process itself. So that pretty much concludes the presentation about benefits of using Bentley Raceway cable management. And at this point, I would like to open for any questions, comments, or anything else that caught your eye.